It was an uncharacteristically quiet night for Donald Trump. The towering skyscrapers of New York City glittered outside his penthouse window, but the usual satisfaction he felt from his empire seemed absent. His life, though filled with power and privilege, often felt distant from the realities of everyday people. On a whim, Trump decided to do something unusual, something he hadn't done in decades. He wanted to experience life as the average Joe. Disguising himself in a baseball cap, casual clothes, and sunglasses, he left his chauffeur and limousine behind. He walked the bustling streets unnoticed, enjoying the anonymity. He soon found himself at a bus stop. He wasn't sure why he was there, but the idea of riding a public bus intrigued him. As the vehicle pulled up, the doors creaking open, Trump stepped aboard and dropped some loose change into the fare box. The bus was dimly lit, its worn seats filled with an assortment of passengers. A mother held a sleeping child in her arms. An elderly man stared out the window with a vacant expression, and a teenager, earphones in, bobbed his head to music. Trump walked down the aisle, scanning the faces until he noticed someone sitting at the very back of the bus, a lone figure who immediately drew his attention. The man looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. His clothes were torn and dirty, his hair unkempt, and his face weathered far beyond his years. In his hands was a small, tattered notebook, which he clutched as if it were his most valuable possession. He wasn't begging for money or talking to anyone. He simply stared out the window, his fingers absent-mindedly flipping through the notebook's pages. Something about the man struck Trump as unusual. Unlike the other passengers, this man didn't appear defeated, despite his outward appearance. There was a quiet dignity in the way he held himself, as if he were guarding a secret or a memory too precious to share. Trump chose a seat a few rows away, but kept glancing at the man. Who was he? What story did he carry in that battered notebook? Trump wasn't used to feeling curiosity about strangers, but this man had sparked something inside him. He wanted to know more, but hesitated, unsure if he should approach. The bus jolted over a pothole, causing Trump to clutch the seat in front of him. The man at the back didn't even flinch. His focus remained steady, his gaze fixed on the city lights outside. Trump took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Something about this moment felt pivotal, as if he were meant to cross paths with this mysterious figure. As the bus rattled on, Trump finally stood up and walked toward the back. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from an inexplicable sense of anticipation. He stopped in front of the man, cleared his throat, and said, "Mind if I sit here?" The man looked up, his eyes meeting Trump's. They were tired eyes, yet they carried a spark of intelligence and a depth that hinted at untold stories. He nodded silently, and Trump slid into the seat beside him. And so began a conversation that would change both their lives forever. The bus jolted again, its worn-out suspension creaking with every bump in the road. Donald Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the silence between him and the man beside him hanging heavy in the air. He wasn't sure how to start a conversation, something that usually came so naturally to him in boardrooms or at rallies. But here, away from the spotlight and stripped of his usual bravado, he felt uncharacteristically uncertain. He glanced sideways at the man, whose fingers were now nervously tracing the edges of his tattered notebook. The man seemed lost in thought, his gaze fixed on the smeared city lights outside the window. Trump cleared his throat again, this time more deliberately. "That's an interesting-looking notebook you've got there," he said, his tone casual but deliberate. The man turned his head slightly, as if surprised that anyone had spoken to him. His eyes met Trump's again, and for a moment he hesitated. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and gravelly, as if it hadn't been used much lately. "It's nothing special, just some old sketches." "Sketches?" Trump leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. "Are you an artist?" The man let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I used to be. A long time ago." Trump caught the faint bitterness in his tone and pressed gently. "What happened?" The man hesitated, his fingers gripping the notebook a little tighter. "Life happened," he said simply. He opened the notebook slightly, revealing pages filled with intricate pencil sketches. The drawings were breathtaking, portraits of people, cityscapes, and abstract designs, all rendered with remarkable skill. Despite the worn edges of the paper, the art radiated raw emotion. Trump was momentarily speechless. "These are incredible," he said finally. "You've got real talent." The man shook his head, a small, bitter smile playing on his lips. "Talent doesn't mean much when you've got nothing to eat, nowhere to sleep. I used to dream of making a living from my art. Now I just draw to remind myself that I'm still alive." Trump felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in a long time: compassion. "How did you end up here?" he asked softly. The man sighed, leaning back against the bus seat. "I had a family once, a wife, a little girl. We were happy, but things started to fall apart when my daughter got sick. Cancer." His voice faltered, and for a moment, he stared down at his lap. "I sold everything to pay for her treatment. Our house, my art supplies, even my wedding ring. It still wasn't enough. She passed away, and my wife, she couldn't take it. She left. After that, I had nothing." Trump sat silently, his usual quick responses failing him. He could feel the weight of the man's words, the depth of his loss. The man gestured to the sketches. "This is all I've got left. It's the only thing that keeps me sane." For the first time in a long while, Trump felt genuinely humbled. "I don't know your name," he said quietly. "Elliot," the man replied, offering a faint smile. "Elliot Graham." "Well, Elliot," Trump said, glancing at the drawings again. "I don't know much about art, but I know talent when I see it." "And you've got it." Elliot chuckled softly. "Thanks, but talent doesn't pay for a meal." Trump didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back, staring at the sketches and the man who had drawn them. He was beginning to feel a determination forming within him, an idea, a spark. But for now, he simply sat there, absorbing the story of a man whose resilience had left an indelible mark on him. As the bus continued its bumpy journey through the city streets, Donald Trump couldn't stop thinking about Elliot's story. The man's quiet dignity, despite the crushing weight of his losses, struck a chord deep within him. He stared out the window, but his mind was far from the bustling lights of the city. Instead, it was filled with images of Elliot's intricate sketches, the pain etched in his words, and the unshakable resilience in his demeanor. The bus screeched to a halt, jolting everyone slightly. Elliot shifted in his seat, closing his notebook and tucking it into the folds of his tattered coat. "This is my stop," he said, his voice soft but firm. Trump glanced at him, unsure of what to say. He felt an overwhelming urge to do something for this man, but wasn't sure how to approach it. He had spent his life making deals, building towers and commanding rooms, but this situation felt profoundly different. It wasn't about power or influence. It was about humanity. As Elliot stood and began to walk toward the door, Trump called out impulsively, "Wait." Elliot turned, his expression cautious, but curious. "Yeah." Trump hesitated. For once, words didn't come easily to him. "Take this," he said finally, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a wad of cash. He didn't even bother to count it. It was likely more money than Elliot had seen in years. "It's not much, but maybe it'll help you get back on your feet." Elliot froze, his hand hovering in midair. His face flickered with conflicting emotions: gratitude, pride, shame. I can't take that," he said, shaking his head. "You've already listened to me. That's more than most people do." Trump pressed the cash into Elliot's hand, his tone firm but kind. "Take it. Call it an investment in your art. Use it to buy supplies, find a place to work, whatever you need. Just promise me you won't give up on your talent." Elliot looked down at the money, his fingers trembling. He opened his mouth to protest again, but stopped when he saw the sincerity in Trump's eyes. After a long pause, he nodded. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Trump felt a wave of relief, but as Elliot stepped off the bus and disappeared into the night, a sense of incompleteness lingered. This small gesture didn't feel like enough. He had the means to do so much more. Why stop here? When the bus reached its final stop, Trump got off and began walking through the streets, lost in thought. His instincts as a problem solver kicked in. Elliot's talent was extraordinary, and his story deserved to be shared. Trump realized he could do more than just hand over cash. He could use his influence to give Elliot a real chance at rebuilding his life. The next morning, back in his office, Trump called one of his trusted aides. "I need you to find someone for me," he said. The aide raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Trump leaned back in his chair, his mind already racing with possibilities. "His name is Elliot Graham. He's an artist, and I'm going to make sure the world sees what he can do." His tone was resolute. For the first time in a while, Trump felt genuinely excited. Not about a business deal or a political maneuver, but about the chance to make a real difference in someone's life. Back in his office the next morning, Donald Trump couldn't shake the image of Elliot Graham clutching his tattered notebook. The sketches haunted him, not just for their beauty, but for the raw pain and hope they conveyed. Elliot's story, of a life broken by tragedy yet sustained by a spark of talent, had stirred something in him. Trump wasn't one to leave a task half-finished, and this felt personal. He summoned his most trusted aide, a sharp and resourceful woman named Carla. She entered the room with her usual efficiency, clipboard in hand. "What's the task today, Mr. Trump?" "I need you to find someone," Trump said, leaning forward. "His name is Elliot Graham. He's a homeless artist. I met him on a bus last night." Carla blinked, surprised. It wasn't often that Trump mentioned personal encounters with strangers, let alone asked for help in this way. "Do you have any more information about him? A location, a description?" Trump thought for a moment. He mentioned losing everything, his family, his home. He sketches in a notebook, extraordinary work. He was last seen on the bus route between Midtown and Harlem. "Start there." Carla nodded, already jotting notes. "Understood. I'll track him down." For the next few days, Carla and a small team discreetly searched for Elliot, combing through shelters, soup kitchens, and parks along the bus route. Meanwhile, Trump began brainstorming how he could make a lasting impact on Elliot's life. He thought of the countless people he'd helped through charitable foundations and personal initiatives, but this felt different. Elliot wasn't just a recipient of charity. He was someone with undeniable talent who needed a platform. By the third day, Carla returned with good news. "We found him," she said, placing a folder on Trump's desk. Inside were photos of Elliot sitting on a park bench, his head bowed over his notebook as he sketched. Trump studied the photos closely. "He looks the same as when I saw him," he murmured, then snapped his fingers. "I want to meet him again." "Arrange it." Later that evening, Carla approached Elliot in the park, introducing herself as someone interested in his art. At first, Elliot was skeptical, but when Carla mentioned a potential opportunity to showcase his work, he reluctantly agreed to meet her client. She didn't reveal Trump's identity, knowing the name alone might intimidate him. The following day, Elliot arrived at a sleek Manhattan office building, his notebook tucked under his arm. He looked out of place in his worn clothes, his eyes darting nervously around the grand lobby. Carla greeted him warmly and led him to a private room where Trump was waiting. Elliot's eyes widened when he recognized the man from the bus. "You," he said, stunned. Trump smiled. "I told you I believe in your talent. Now I want to prove it." Elliot sat down hesitantly, clutching his notebook. Trump explained his plan. He would sponsor an art showcase for Elliot, covering the cost of supplies, framing, and renting a gallery. Trump's team would help promote the event to ensure Elliot's work reached the right audience. Elliot was overwhelmed. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because you deserve a second chance," Trump said simply. "Your story and your talent deserve to be seen." With tears in his eyes, Elliot nodded. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," Trump replied. "Just show the world what you can do." The plan was set into motion. Trump's team worked tirelessly, helping Elliot prepare his sketches for display. Elliot, for the first time in years, had access to proper art supplies and a space to work. Slowly, he began to rediscover the joy of creating, his confidence growing with each stroke of his pencil. For the first time in years, Elliot Graham felt a spark of hope. Under Donald Trump's sponsorship, his life began to change in ways he had never imagined. Trump's team rented a modest studio space for Elliot, stocked it with professional art supplies, and provided him with a small stipend to cover his basic needs. The studio, with its large windows overlooking the bustling city streets, became a sanctuary where Elliot could reconnect with the creative passion he had long buried beneath years of despair. At first, the change felt surreal. Elliot spent hours sitting in the studio, staring at the blank canvas before him, his hand hesitant to make the first mark. Doubts crept in. What if his work wasn't good enough? What if he failed again? But then he remembered Trump's words. Your story and your talent deserve to be seen. Slowly, he picked up a pencil and began to sketch. Day by day, his confidence grew. The initial sketches were tentative, but as he regained his rhythm, the strokes became bolder, the images more vivid. Elliot poured his emotions into his art, capturing not only the pain and loss he had endured, but also the resilience and hope that had carried him through. His pieces told stories of heartbreak and healing, despair and determination. Each work was a testament to his journey and a reflection of the world through his eyes. Meanwhile, Trump's team worked behind the scenes to prepare for the art showcase. They secured a prominent gallery in Manhattan, ensuring that Elliot's work would be displayed to an audience that could appreciate his talent. Press releases were sent out, invitations extended to critics, collectors, and art enthusiasts. The event quickly garnered attention, billed as a celebration of raw talent and human resilience. As the date of the showcase approached, Elliot's transformation became evident not only in his art, but in his demeanor. The man who once sat silently in the back of a bus, clutching a tattered notebook, now stood taller, his eyes brighter with purpose. He began to dream again, not of fame or wealth, but of creating art that could inspire others, that could give voice to those who felt unseen. On the night of the showcase, the gallery buzzed with anticipation. Elliot stood in the corner, nervously tugging at the sleeve of his borrowed suit. Trump arrived quietly, observing the event from the sidelines, his presence understated but watchful. As the guests moved through the gallery, the reaction to Elliot's work was overwhelming. People stopped to admire the pieces, some moved to tears by the raw emotion captured in the drawings. A prominent art critic declared Elliot's work a triumph of the human spirit, while collectors inquired about purchasing several pieces. By the end of the night, Elliot had sold nearly all of his displayed works. The proceeds were more money than he had seen in years, enough to secure a small apartment and continue pursuing his art. More importantly, he had found a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. Trump approached him at the end of the evening, his expression warm but calm. "You did it," he said simply. Elliot looked at him, his voice thick with gratitude. "No, we did it. You gave me a chance when no one else would." Trump shook his head. "You had the talent all along. I just made sure the world saw it." For Elliot, this wasn't just a new chapter. It was a whole new book. His journey from despair to hope was proof that sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you to change everything. And for Trump, the experience was a reminder that true success wasn't measured in skyscrapers or headlines, but in the lives you touch and the legacies you help create. The months following the showcase brought dramatic changes to Elliot Graham's life. His success at the gallery had attracted the attention of collectors and art enthusiasts from across the city. Commissions began pouring in, and Elliot found himself busier than he had ever been. For the first time in years, he had a steady income, a place to call home, and a purpose that filled his days with meaning. But amid the whirlwind of his newfound success, one question lingered in Elliot's mind. Who was the man who had believed in him when no one else would? He knew the anonymous sponsor who had set up the showcase was the same man he had met on the bus, but beyond that, the details were hazy. Elliot wanted to thank him, not just for the financial help, but for reigniting the hope he had almost lost. The answer came unexpectedly one crisp autumn evening. Elliot had been invited to a private reception at the gallery, where his latest collection was being celebrated. The room was filled with well-dressed patrons sipping champagne and discussing his work with admiration. Elliot, dressed in a tailored suit that felt strange but comfortable, was still adjusting to the idea of being the center of attention. As he greeted guests and answered their questions, his eyes caught sight of a familiar figure standing near the entrance. He blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. But there was no mistaking it. It was the man from the bus, his unlikely benefactor. Elliot excused himself from the conversation and walked across the room, his heart pounding. "Is it really you?" Elliot asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Donald Trump turned to face him, a warm smile spreading across his face. "I was wondering how long it would take you to notice." Elliot was stunned. "You're the one who made all of this possible. You're the sponsor?" Trump nodded. "Guilty as charged. I saw your potential that night on the bus, and I knew the world needed to see it too." Elliot shook his head in amazement. "I don't even know what to say. You've changed my life." Trump placed a hand on Elliot's shoulder. "You changed your life, Elliot. I just gave you the platform. Everything you've achieved is because of your talent, your resilience, and your heart." The two men stood there for a moment, surrounded by the buzz of the reception. Elliot's eyes glistened with tears as he said, "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Trump smiled, a rare expression of genuine satisfaction. "The pleasure was mine. Seeing your work, hearing your story, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. We all need someone to believe in us at some point." The evening continued, but the connection between the two men lingered. Elliot, now confident and thriving, became an advocate for struggling artists, often sharing his story to inspire others. Trump, despite his busy life, kept tabs on Elliot's career, quietly supporting him whenever he could. Years later, as Elliot's name became synonymous with resilience and artistic brilliance, he often looked back on that night on the bus as the moment everything changed. And Donald Trump, a man known for his towering skyscrapers and larger-than-life persona, found unexpected fulfillment in knowing that one act of kindness had helped transform a life. In the end, it wasn't just about art or success. It was about the enduring power of compassion, the courage to take a chance on someone, and the belief that even the smallest gestures can create ripples of change. For Elliot and Trump, their encounter was a testament to the fact that humanity's greatest strength lies in its ability to lift each other up. And that was a story worth celebrating.